a millionaire father arrives home hours ahead of schedule and enters the mansion without making a sound. As he approaches the living room, he hears childish laughter and can hardly believe it when he realizes it's coming from his blind daughters, something that hadn't happened in months. The shock paralyzes him when he sees the nanny guiding the girls, free and happy, running barefoot as if they could see with their hearts. What he witnesses is so unexpected and powerful that it makes him nearly faint as he realizes someone has given his daughters back the life he believed was lost. The flight to Washington, D.C. had been cancelled. William Harrington stared at the departures board at LaGuardia Airport with a mixture of irritation and resignation. 2 hours of waiting, check-in completed, meeting confirmed, and now that message flashing in red, announcing technical problems with the aircraft. The businessman ran a hand through his dark hair, already starting to show a few grey strands at 38, and sighed deeply. There was no point in arguing with the attendant who repeated mechanical apologies, nor was it worth waiting for the next flight. The meeting would have to be rescheduled. As he drove his BMW through the streets of New York toward Greenwich, Connecticut, William felt that familiar sense of emptiness that had accompanied him for 2 years. The traffic was surprisingly light for a Tuesday afternoon, and he would be home at least 3 hours earlier than planned. The 2-story white mansion, surrounded by high walls and impeccable gardens, was a symbol of everything he had achieved, but also of everything he had lost. Eleanor, his wife, had turned that house into a home. She had chosen every detail of the decor, planted the rose bushes that still bloomed in the garden, and filled the rooms with laughter and music. Now, everything seemed excessively quiet, as if the house itself were in mourning. William avoided spending much time there, preferring to dive into spreadsheets, meetings, and business trips. It was easier than facing the ghosts that haunted every hallway. He parked the car in the garage and turned off the engine, remaining silent for a few moments. He grabbed his briefcase from the passenger seat and walked to the side entrance, the one that led directly to his office. He didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to explain his early return. He just needed a few hours locked away with papers and numbers, where everything made sense, where there was no room for feelings. The house was silent when he entered. The air conditioning maintained a pleasant temperature, and the faint scent of lavender came from the diffusers that Victoria had insisted on placing in every room. Victoria Davenport, his fiancée, an elegant woman from New York high society, whom he had met at a charity event 8 months ago. She was everything that seemed appropriate, everything people expected of him at that point in his life. Beautiful, sophisticated, from a traditional family always impeccably dressed and perfumed. William left his briefcase in the hall and loosened his tie. He was about to go up the stairs when a sound made him stop. It was faint, almost imperceptible, coming from the direction of the living room that opened onto the inner garden. A laugh. No, 2 laughs. Childlike, genuine, full of a joy he hadn't heard in so long, he had almost forgotten what it sounded like. His heart raced. Lily and Daisy, his 4-year-old twin daughters. When was the last time he had heard them laugh like that? Weeks? Months? He knew he was an absent father. Knew he used work as a shield against the pain of looking at those 2 brown-haired girls with eyes that could no longer see. The accident that had taken Eleanor from this world had also stolen his daughter's sight. Complications, the doctors had said. Traumatic brain injury, hemorrhage, irreversible damage. Technical words that did nothing to alleviate the weight of the guilt William carried. He walked slowly toward the sound of laughter, as if in a dream. The living room door was ajar, and he could see through the crack. The inner garden, the space Eleanor had loved so much, with its tropical plants and the skylight that let in natural light, was unrecognizable. There was something different on the floor, colorful textures arranged in an irregular path. Golden chimes, hanging at different heights, swayed gently, producing delicate sounds. And there they were. Lily and Daisy, barefoot, without the white canes that always accompanied them, running. Their small feet touched the different textures on the floor, plush carpets, smooth surfaces, something that looked like sand. They were laughing, reaching out their hands to touch the chimes without fear, without hesitation. William felt his legs grow weak. A female voice, young and enthusiastic, guided the girls' movements. It was the new nanny, the one Victoria had hired 3 weeks ago, after dismissing the previous two. William barely knew her, having only seen her briefly one morning as he was leaving for the office. A simple girl of humble appearance, her black hair tied back in a ponytail, no makeup, wearing faded jeans and a white t-shirt. He remembered thinking she seemed too young, too inexperienced. Now, watching through the crack in the door, he saw something completely different. The girl was crouched in the middle of the garden, her clear, patient voice describing every movement. She told the girls where each texture was, encouraged them to explore, to trust their other senses. There was no fear in her voice, no pity. There was joy, enthusiasm, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Lily, always the more cautious of the two, touched something that felt like soft moss and let out a laugh of pure surprise. Daisy, more adventurous, had already reached a plant and was touching its leaves with delicate fingers, asking the name of each one. The nanny answered with infinite patience, describing not just the names but the sensations. The fern leaf was as soft as velvet cloth. The snake plant was firm and cool, like a slice of chilled watermelon. William felt something warm run down his face and realized he was crying. When was the last time he had cried? At Eleanor's funeral? No, he hadn't even managed it then. He had been frozen, petrified, receiving condolences with a mechanical nod, while inside something shattered into 1,000 fragments. After that, he had simply locked everything away, buried under layers of work and responsibilities. But now, seeing his daughter so alive, so happy, so different from the scared, withdrawn children he usually encountered in the rare moments he spent at home, something inside him began to crack. These were not the silent girls who sat in their rooms, as still as porcelain dolls, waiting for someone to guide them from one place to another. These were real children, exploring, discovering, living. The nanny held the twins' hands and led them to what looked like a small low table covered with plastic. William saw pots of paint, large and colorful, and his muscles tensed automatically. Victoria had strict rules about mess. The girls were not allowed to play with anything that could stain them. They couldn't get dirty. They couldn't risk getting hurt. It was for their safety, she always said. Special children needed special care. But the nanny didn't seem worried about that. She opened the paint pots and began to describe the colors in a way William had never imagined possible. She said that yellow was warm, like the sun touching the skin on a summer day. That blue was cool, like diving into a swimming pool. That red was intense, like the heat of a fireplace. The girls touched the paints with their fingers, fascinated, feeling the different temperatures and textures the nanny had prepared, some paints warm, others cold. Soon, little hands were covered in colors, pressing them against large sheets of paper. Lily laughed every time her hand touched the paper and left a mark she couldn't see but could feel, the texture of the wet paint under her fingers. Daisy mixed colors, fascinated by the different sensations each combination produced. The nanny narrated every action with a voice full of genuine emotion, celebrating each colorful mark as if it were a masterpiece. William didn't know how long he stood there, hidden, just watching. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time seemed to have lost its meaning. He saw his daughters paint, laugh, explore the inner garden with a freedom he had never imagined possible. He saw the nanny carefully clean their dirty little hands, talking the whole time about the colors they had used, about how each one had a different personality. Then the girl did something that surprised him even more. She sat on the floor between the two girls and began to sing. It was a simple children's song, about birds and trees and the wind that blows through the leaves. But her voice was sweet and in tune, and the twins leaned against her, one on each side, humming along to the parts they already knew. The scene was so perfect, so full of tenderness, that William felt a painful tightness in his chest. It was in that moment that he realized something that hit him like a punch to the gut. His daughters were happy, truly happy, and it wasn't with him. It wasn't in his arms that they nestled for comfort and love. It was with this unknown girl, this nanny he barely knew, that they found the joy he could no longer provide. Guilt came in waves. He had failed Eleanor. He hadn't been able to protect her. He had failed his daughters, leaving them in the hands of strangers while he hid behind spreadsheets and meetings. And now he discovered that a complete stranger was giving them something that he, their father, should have been giving them. love, attention, the chance to be children. William wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. Should he go in? Should he reveal himself? Part of him wanted to run, go back to the car, pretend he had never seen any of it. But another part, a part he thought he had buried along with Eleanor, wanted to enter that garden, sit on the floor beside his daughters, feel their small hands in his, hear their laughter up close. He took a step forward. The door creaked slightly, and 3 heads turned in his direction. The twins couldn't see him, but their little faces turned toward the sound, their expressions curious and slightly apprehensive. The nanny stood up quickly, wiping her hands on her already paint-stained jeans, her eyes wide with surprise and, he realized, a touch of fear. William opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. What could he say? How could he explain that he was there, watching in secret, crying like a child? The nanny took a step forward, instinctively placing herself between him and the girls, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed. "Mr. Harrington, I wasn't expecting you back so soon." The nanny's voice came out shaky, and she maintained her protective stance in front of the girls. "I'm sorry, I should have asked for permission before doing these activities with Lily and Daisy, but Miss Victoria told me I could use the inner garden in the afternoon, and I thought it would be safe." "Daddy?" Lily's small voice sounded uncertain, almost scared. Was that the tone she always used when he came near? William felt his heart clench even tighter. Daisy remained silent, her little fingers clutching the hem of the nanny's pants. He took another step into the garden, and the nanny visibly tensed. William realized she was expecting a scolding, perhaps even to be fired. That's what would have happened if Victoria were there. She would have had a fit seeing the girls barefoot, covered in paint, exploring the environment without strict supervision. But William was not Victoria, and what he had seen in the last few minutes had cracked something inside him that had been buried for too long. "Can I join in?" The words came out before he could think them through. The nanny blinked, clearly confused. He cleared his throat and repeated, this time more firmly, "Can I join the game?" The silence that followed was broken by Daisy. "Daddy wants to play with us." There was so much surprise in her voice that William felt shame burn in his cheeks. When was the last time he had played with his daughters? Months ago? Perhaps never, not after the accident. The nanny still seemed uncertain, but there was something different in her eyes now. Not fear, but caution. "Of course, Mr. Harrington, the girls would be very happy." She crouched down beside the twins and whispered something William couldn't quite hear, but he caught stray words. "Hiya, Daddy, play together, be gentle." William took off his suit jacket, loosened his tie even more, and, after a moment's hesitation, removed his expensive Italian shoes. His bare feet touched the garden floor, feeling the first texture of the sensory path the nanny had created. It was a kind of soft mat, similar to artificial grass but with longer fibers. "Lily, Daisy, come here." His voice came out rougher than he intended, and he forced himself to soften it. "Please." The girls approached slowly, guided by the nanny who whispered encouragements. When they were close enough, William knelt on the floor, getting down to their level. He held out his hands, and after a moment of hesitation, he felt their small, still slightly sticky hands touch his. "What were you doing?" he asked, and this time his voice was softer. "Tell me about the colors." It was as if floodgates had opened. Daisy began to talk excitedly about how the yellow was warm and the blue was cold, and Lily shyly added that the green smelled like the garden leaves, because the nanny had mixed a little bit of mint juice into the green paint, so that each color would have a different scent as well. The nanny watched everything with an expression William couldn't quite decipher. There was relief there, certainly, but also something deeper. Hope, perhaps, or fear that this moment would shatter at any second. The girl introduced herself as Emily Carter, 24 years old, with a degree in education and a specialization in inclusive learning. She spoke with passion about multisensory techniques, about how visually impaired children could develop independence and self-confidence when given the right stimuli. William listened to her as his daughters guided him through the sensory circuit she had created. "There's sand here, Daddy, feel?" Daisy pressed his hand against a shallow tray filled with fine sand. "And here are smooth pebbles, they make a noise when you shake them." Lily shook a small jar full of colourful pebbles, producing a pleasant sound. For almost an hour, William played with his daughters in a way he never had before. He painted with them, using his hands to create abstract shapes on paper, feeling the different textures of each colour that Emily had carefully prepared. He touched the plants in the inner garden, learning along with the girls to identify them by touch and smell. He walked barefoot on the sensory path, closing his eyes at times to try and experience the world as his daughters did. It was Emily who narrated everything. She had a special way of describing things, turning every object, every sensation, into a little story. The fern wasn't just a plant. It was a green cascade of delicate leaves that danced when the wind blew through the skylight. The sand wasn't just sand. It was a miniature beach where you could build invisible but perfectly real castles. At one point, Lily grew tired of playing and simply sat on William's lap, resting her little head on his chest. The businessman froze, unsure what to do, until he felt Daisy do the same on the other side. Emily, sensing the moment, discreetly moved a few steps away, giving them privacy. "Do you have fun like this every day?" William asked quietly, stroking Lily's brown hair. "No." Daisy's reply was immediate and tinged with sadness. "Aunt Victoria doesn't like it. She says we might get hurt." "But Emily is careful, Daddy," Lily added quickly, as if afraid the nanny would be punished. "She always stays close, and the floor is soft, and she explains everything before we do it." William looked at Emily, who had busied herself organizing the paint pots, pretending not to hear the conversation. The girl was nervous. He could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly. She knew she was doing something Victoria would disapprove of. And yet, she was doing it. "Why?" he asked suddenly, his voice carrying more emotion than he intended. "Why do you do this? Why do you care so much?" Emily stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Her brown eyes were bright, and when she spoke, her voice was firm despite her visible nervousness. "Because they deserve it, Mr. Harrington. Lily and Daisy are intelligent, curious children, full of life. Blindness doesn't define who they are or what they can do. They just need to learn to navigate the world in a different way." "But it's dangerous," William repeated Victoria's words almost automatically. "They could get hurt." "With all due respect, sir, children get hurt. It's part of growing up, of learning limits, of developing spatial awareness." Emily's expression was passionate now, all her previous shyness disappearing when she spoke about her work. "If we keep them in a glass bubble, never letting them experience anything, we're robbing them of the chance to be independent. When they're 10, 15, 20, they'll depend on someone for everything, not because they can't do it, but because they were never taught that they could." The words hit William like well-aimed arrows. That was exactly what Victoria did, and he had allowed it. She kept the girls confined, immobile, dependent, all in the name of safety. But safety at what cost? At the cost of their childhoods, of their future possibilities. He was about to answer when he heard the front door open forcefully. Loud, quick footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. Victoria's voice called his name, sounding shrill and impatient. "William! William, where are you? Why is your car in the garage? You're supposed to be in DC." William felt his daughters stiffen in his arms. Lily clung to his shirt tightly, and Daisy began to tremble slightly. Their reaction told him everything he needed to know. They were afraid of Victoria. Emily quickly stood up and began to gather the materials scattered around the garden, her movements hurried and nervous. "Mr. Harrington, I'll take the girls to wash their hands," she said quickly, reaching her arms out to the twins. But before William could answer, Victoria appeared at the entrance to the inner garden. She was impeccable as always, in a tight navy blue dress that highlighted her slim figure, her perfectly styled blonde hair falling in waves over her shoulders, her makeup flawless even in the middle of the afternoon. Her light blue eyes swept over the scene in a matter of seconds, and William saw her expression change from confusion to shock and then to restrained fury. "What is going on here?" Her voice was controlled, but William knew that tone. It was the same one she used when she was absolutely furious, but trying to maintain her composure. "William, why are you barefoot on the floor? And the girls?" Her gaze fell on Lily and Daisy, still in their father's lap with paint stains on their clothes and arms. "My God, they're filthy. Completely filthy." "Victoria." The flight was cancelled, William began, but she didn't seem to be listening. She advanced into the garden, her high heels clicking against the ceramic tile surrounding the plant area. "You?" She pointed an accusing finger at Emily, who paled visibly. "I made the rules very clear. The girls are to remain clean, safe, and properly supervised. What is all this?" Emily opened her mouth to answer, but Victoria didn't give her a chance. She continued, her voice rising. "Paint? You let blind children play with paint? They're barefoot. Where are their canes? And this ridiculous circuit on the floor, what is this?" "It's a sensory exercise," Emily finally managed to say, her voice low but firm, "to help them develop spatial awareness and confidence." "Spatial awareness?" Victoria let out a humorless laugh. "They're blind. They don't need spatial awareness. They need protection. They need to stay in safe places where they can't get hurt." William felt his daughter shrink even closer to him. "Victoria, maybe we should discuss this in private," he suggested, trying to keep his voice calm. But Victoria was on a wave of indignation that would not be easily contained. "No, William, this needs to be said now." She looked directly at Emily. "You are giving these children false hope, making them think they can be like normal children, that they can run and play and be independent. But they can't. They never will. And the sooner they accept their limitations, the better it will be for everyone." The words fell into the garden like stones, heavy and brutal. William saw Emily pale even further, saw tears glisten in her eyes, but the young woman kept her chin up. "With all due respect, Miss Davenport, blindness is not a prison sentence. With the right stimuli and proper training, Lily and Daisy can have full and independent lives. You have no authority to contradict my decisions in this house." Victoria's voice rose dangerously, echoing off the walls of the inner garden. "I am the future Mrs. Harrington, and these children will soon be under my care. I will not tolerate an underqualified nanny questioning my methods." Emily remained standing, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, but she did not back down. "Mr. Harrington hired me because I have a degree in inclusive education. My methods are based on scientific research and best practices recommended by child development experts for visually impaired children." "Experts?" Victoria practically spat the word. "You're barely out of college. Do you think a few books you've read give you the right to expose these children to unnecessary risks? Look at them. Filthy, barefoot, completely vulnerable." William felt Lily start to cry softly against his chest. Daisy had hidden her face in his shoulder, her small hands clutching his shirt with desperate force. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he needed to do something. "Victoria, that's enough." His voice came out louder than he intended, surprising everyone, including himself. "The girls are scared. We can discuss this later when we're alone." Victoria turned to him, her blue eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "You're defending this girl, after everything I've done for you, for this family? I organize this house. I take care of everything. I ensure your daughters are safe, and you question me in front of a servant?" The word servant left her mouth laced with disdain, and William saw Emily flinch as if she'd been slapped. The young woman lowered her eyes, biting her bottom lip, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "I'm not questioning you." William tried to keep his voice calm but firm. "I'm just saying the girls are scared and this conversation can wait." He looked at Emily. "Please, take Lily and Daisy for a bath. And thank you," he added, the words coming out before he could think better of it, "for what you did today." I saw that they were happy. Emily's eyes widened in surprise and a faint blush colored her cheeks. She nodded, extending her hands to the girls. "Come on, Lily, Daisy. Let's get cleaned up and then you can tell me what your favorite part of today's game was." The twins hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave the safety of their father's arms while Victoria was still there. But Emily's soft, encouraging voice eventually convinced them. William gently set them on the floor, and they held the nanny's hands with impressive confidence, allowing her to guide them out of the garden. Victoria waited until they were out of earshot before exploding. "How dare you humiliate me like that in front of a servant, making me look like the villain when all I do is protect your daughters?" William stood up, brushing the sand that had stuck to his pants. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you, Victoria, but you were scaring the girls." "Scaring them?" She let out a bitter laugh. "I was being the only responsible adult in this situation. William, did you see what that girl was doing? Letting blind children run barefoot, play with paint, touch plants that could be poisonous. It's pure irresponsibility. They were happy, William retorted, a growing firmness in his voice. When was the last time you saw Lily and Daisy laugh like that? Really laugh without fear? Victoria crossed her arms over her chest, her posture defensive. Children don't need to laugh all the time, William. They need to be safe. They need to understand their limitations, and your daughters have very serious limitations that cannot be ignored. Limitations that you are imposing, he said, the words slipping out before he could consider the consequences. Emily is right. Blindness doesn't have to be a prison. I can't believe I'm hearing this. Victoria paced back and forth, her heels making aggressive sounds against the floor. You're actually believing a nanny who's been here less than a month instead of trusting me. Me, who has stood by you through these difficult last months. Who organized this chaotic house? Who established routines? Who made sure your daughters had structure? Structure or a prison? William didn't know where this sudden courage was coming from, but the words kept coming. They're 4 years old, Victoria. They should be playing, exploring, learning, not sitting in a room all day like porcelain dolls. Victoria's face turned red with indignation. You don't know what you're talking about. You barely spend any time with them. You're always traveling, always at the office, always too busy to be a father. And now, in a single day, you think you know more than I do about what's best for them. The blow hit its mark, and William felt the familiar guilt tighten his chest. She was right. He was an absent father. He had emotionally abandoned his daughters after Eleanor's death, but that didn't mean Victoria was right to keep them locked away. Maybe I have been an absent father, he admitted, his voice lower now, but that doesn't change the fact that I saw my daughters happier today than I have in the last 2 years. That has to mean something. Victoria took a deep breath, visibly striving to regain control. When she spoke again, her voice was calmer, almost seductive. William, darling, I know you want what's best for Lily and Daisy. I do too, but you need to trust me. I've done research, spoken with experts, established safety protocols. This Emily is young, inexperienced, full of romantic ideas about what disabled children can or cannot do. She'll end up creating unrealistic expectations, and worse, she could put the girls in real danger. William hesitated. Part of him wanted to believe her, wanted to return to the comfort zone of letting someone else make all the decisions while he buried himself in work. But another part, a part that had awakened upon seeing his daughters laugh freely, couldn't just ignore what he had witnessed. Which experts? He asked. Can you give me their names? I'd like to speak with them. Victoria's expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Of course, I have it all written down. I can give it to you later. She moved closer to him, placing a hand on his arm, her voice softening. William, you're tired. It's been a long day, the cancelled flight, this surprise when you got home. Why don't you go rest for a bit while I take care of things here? Tomorrow we can talk calmly about the girls' routines. He looked at her, really looked, perhaps for the first time in months. Victoria was beautiful, no doubt. Elegant, sophisticated, always perfect. But there was something in her eyes at that moment, a calculated coldness he had never noticed before, or maybe it had always been there, and he had simply chosen not to see it. I'm going to talk to Emily tomorrow, he said finally. I want to better understand her methods, see the references she has. Victoria removed her hand from his arm, her mask of sympathy slipping again. Fine, talk to her. But when you find out she's nothing more than an idealistic little girl with no real experience, I hope you make the right decision. She turned to leave but stopped at the door, looking back. And William? The girls need a bath and dinner. I'll instruct the cook. I assume you have work to do in the office. It was a clear dismissal, and William felt the familiar pang of irritation. But before he could respond, she was already gone, her footsteps echoing down the hall. He was left alone in the inner garden, surrounded by the materials Emily had so carefully prepared. The paint pots were still open, the vibrant colors looking almost accusatory under the light streaming through the skylight. The papers with his daughter's handprints were scattered on the floor, small abstract works of art that told the story of an afternoon of discovery and joy. William crouched down and picked up one of the papers. The marks were uneven, childlike, but there was something profoundly touching about them. He imagined Lily and Daisy laughing as they pressed their hands against the paper, experimenting with the different temperatures and textures of the paints Emily had prepared. He imagined the nanny narrating every action with that soft, encouraging voice, turning a simple activity into a sensory adventure. When was the last time he had truly paid attention to his daughters? When was the last time he had sat with them, talked with them, tried to understand the world through their unseeing eyes? Guilt came in waves, threatening to drown him. Eleanor would be disappointed in him. His wife had adored those girls with an intensity that had almost frightened him. She had plans for them, dreams of who they would become. And after the accident, when the girls lost their sight along with their mother, William had simply given up. He had decided it was easier to leave them in the care of professionals, to keep his distance, to avoid the pain of seeing them every day and remembering all they had lost. But Emily didn't see limitations when she looked at Lily and Daisy. She saw possibilities. She saw two intelligent, capable children who just needed the right guidance to flourish. And in just a few weeks, she had achieved something that all the other professionals Victoria had hired had failed to do. She had made the girls smile again. William carefully folded the paper and put it in his pants pocket. He needed to think, to understand what was really happening in this house. He needed to find out if Victoria was truly acting in his daughter's best interests, or if there was something else at play. He went up the stairs toward the girls' room, guided by the sounds of running water and soft voices. The bathroom door was ajar, and he could hear Emily humming a song as she helped the twins with their bath. The girls were laughing, asking questions about soap bubbles and shampoo foam, and Emily answered each one with infinite patience. William stood outside, listening. He didn't go in, didn't reveal himself. He just listened to his new nanny turn a simple bath into another adventure of discovery, describing how the bubbles were as light as clouds, how the shampoo foam tickled the palm of your hand, how the warm water relaxed tired muscles after an afternoon of play. The following days brought a palpable tension to the Harrington mansion. William tried to spend more time at home, arriving earlier from the office, cancelling some non-essential trips. He wanted to observe, to understand the dynamic that had been established among Victoria, Emily, and his daughters. What he discovered deeply disturbed him. Victoria was meticulous in her manipulations. She never yelled at the girls when William was around, never openly showed her hostility toward Emily. But there were small gestures, subtle comments that revealed much more than she realized. During breakfast, when Daisy accidentally knocked over a glass of juice, Victoria sighed loudly and commented in a sweet but censorious voice, "See, darling, this is why we need to be more careful. You can't see where things are, so you need to move slowly, very slowly. Or better yet, wait for someone to do it for you." Emily, who was helping Lily spread jam on her toast, opened her mouth to say something but closed it again when she saw Victoria's warning glance. William intervened. "It was an accident, Victoria. Accidents happen." "Of course they do," she replied with a forced smile. "But with special children we need to minimize the risks, don't you think?" That word, special. Victoria used it constantly, but always laden with a subtext that William was beginning to notice. Not as a compliment or recognition of unique abilities, but as a limiting label, an excuse to keep the girls confined. He also noticed how Victoria found subtle ways to sabotage Emily's efforts. When the nanny organized the girls' toys in a specific way so they could locate them by touch and spatial memory, Victoria would rearrange everything the next day, claiming she was making the room tidier. When Emily created braille labels to identify the girls' clothes, allowing them to start choosing what to wear on their own, Victoria removed them, saying the adhesive damaged the expensive fabric of the garments. It was a silent war, and William was beginning to understand who truly cared about his daughter's well-being. One evening, 5 days after the incident in the inner garden, Victoria entered William's office with a tray of coffee and that smile he was learning to distrust. "Darling, we need to talk." She placed the tray on his desk and sat in the chair opposite him, crossing her legs elegantly. "I've been thinking a lot about the situation with Emily and the girls." William closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. "I'm listening." "I know you were impressed with those games she played with Lily and Daisy," Victoria began, her voice smooth and reasonable. "And I understand, I really do. It's comforting to see the girls happy. But William, Momentary happiness is not the same as long-term safety. He didn't respond, waiting for her to continue. I've spoken with some people, Victoria went on. Real experts, not recent graduates with romantic ideas, and they all said the same thing. Children with severe visual impairment, especially those who lost their sight traumatically, need rigid structure and constant protection. Exposing them to activities that encourage early independence can result in serious accidents, emotional trauma when they inevitably fail, and even developmental regression. Who are these experts? William asked, remembering she had promised to provide names and still hadn't. Victoria hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Dr. Finch, from the Institute of Ophthalmology, Dr. Reed, a child psychologist specializing in trauma. I can get you their full contact information if you like. I would like that, William said firmly. I'd like to speak with them personally. A flash of irritation crossed Victoria's face before she recomposed her expression. Of course. But William, in the meantime, I think we should take some precautions. She leaned forward, her voice lowering as if sharing a secret. I've been thinking about installing security cameras in the common areas of the house, not to spy on anyone, she added quickly, but to ensure the girls are always safe even when we can't be watching. William frowned. Cameras? Don't you think that's excessive? Not at all, Victoria argued. Many families with special children do it. It's a matter of security, and, well, it would also allow us to document the methods Emily uses with the girls. If she's being as responsible as she claims, she'll have nothing to hide, right? There was a seductive logic to her argument. William knew it, even as he recognized it came from a place of distrust. I don't know, Victoria, it seems invasive. What's invasive is exposing two blind children to potentially dangerous situations, she retorted, her voice gaining a slight edge. William, I'm not asking to install cameras in their bedroom or bathroom, just in the common areas. The living room, the inner garden, the playroom, places where Emily works with them. If her methods are as wonderful as she claims, the cameras will only prove it, and if they're not... She left the sentence hanging, pregnant with implications. William massaged his temples, feeling the start of a headache. Let me think about it. Victoria stood up, rounding the desk to stand behind him. Her hands began to massage his tense shoulders, her skilled fingers finding the knots of tension. You're so stressed, darling. Carrying all this weight alone, the company, the girls, our personal lives. Let me help you. Let me take care of these domestic things so you can focus on what you do best. It was tempting. So tempting to just let Victoria take over, make the decisions, handle the complications. It was what he had been doing for the past few months, after all, but something stopped him from agreeing immediately this time. Maybe it was the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing in his memory. Maybe it was the way they had clung to him that afternoon in the garden, needing him in a way they hadn't for so long. I'll think about it, he repeated, and Victoria had to be content with that. 3 days later, William left for an unavoidable business trip to Chicago. It would only be for one night, an important meeting with investors that couldn't be postponed. Before leaving, he stopped by the girls' room to say goodbye. Emily was reading to them, not a regular book, but a Braille book that taught as it entertained. Their small hands ran over the raised dots, and Emily guided their fingers patiently, teaching them to recognize patterns, to associate symbols with sounds and meanings. I'm leaving on a trip today, William announced from the doorway, and 2 little heads turned in his direction. Are you coming back tomorrow, Daddy? Lily asked, and there was a sadness in her voice that made William's heart ache. Yes, I am, sweetie. I'll be here tomorrow night to say good night to you. Daisy got up and walked toward him, her hands outstretched. Emily had taught the girls to orient themselves using reference points, and Daisy mentally counted steps, adjusting her direction by the sound of her father's voice. When she was close enough, William scooped her up, impressed by his daughter's growing confidence. Be careful, Daddy, she said, hugging his neck tightly. I always am, he promised, feeling a lump in his throat. He didn't see Victoria's expression as she watched from the doorway, didn't see the cold calculation in her eyes as she planned her next moves. While William was in Chicago, Victoria hired a security company. She told them her husband had approved the installation, that it was a matter of the children's safety. The cameras were installed discreetly in the living room, the inner garden, and the playroom. Small, almost invisible, capturing everything in high definition. Emily didn't know about the cameras. No one told her. And in the following days, as she worked with Lily and Daisy, teaching them, playing with them, helping them develop confidence and skills, everything was being recorded. But Victoria also didn't know that the cameras would record much more than she planned. When William returned from Chicago, Victoria greeted him with news. "The cameras are installed," she announced with satisfaction. "I've already got some interesting clips of Emily's work. I think you should watch." They sat in the office, and Victoria played several videos on her laptop. William saw Emily working with the girls, her infinite patience, her genuine enthusiasm, the affectionate way she touched their hair when they did something right, how she comforted them when they got frustrated. "See?" Victoria pointed to details in the videos. "Here she lets Daisy climb on the sofa by herself. What if she falls? And here, look, she's teaching Lily to pour water into a glass. The girl almost spilled everything." William watched in silence. What Victoria saw as irresponsibility, he saw as teaching. Daisy learning to navigate furniture, Lily developing fine motor skills. Yes, there were small accidents, but nothing serious. And the expressions of pride on the girls' faces when they managed to do something on their own were undeniable. "I don't see anything wrong here, Victoria," he said finally. She looked at him in disbelief. "You're not seeing it. She's exposing your daughters to unnecessary risks." "She's teaching my daughters to be independent," William corrected, his voice firm. Victoria slammed the laptop shut, frustration evident in every movement. "You're being blind, William, as blind as they are. This girl is manipulating you, making you think she's some kind of savior when in reality she's just satisfying her own idealistic teacher ego." The argument in the office ended without resolution. William maintained his position that he saw nothing wrong with Emily's methods, and Victoria left furious, slamming the door behind her. He knew he had created a rift in their relationship, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. For the first time in a long time, he was putting his daughters first. In the following days, the tension in the house escalated. Victoria became noticeably colder toward William, answering his questions with monosyllables, avoiding physical contact. But with the girls and Emily, she maintained a facade of normality that was beginning to fray at the edges. William noticed little things, how Victoria always found reasons to interrupt Emily's activities with the girls. One time, it was because it was snack time, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon and the girls weren't hungry. Another time, it was because she had scheduled a last-minute doctor's appointment that no one else knew about. Emily accepted everything with a patience that impressed William. The young woman never complained, never confronted Victoria directly. She simply adjusted her plans, found other times, other ways to continue her work with Lily and Daisy. One afternoon, William decided to work from home. He set himself up in the office but left the door ajar, his ears attuned to the sounds of the house. He heard Emily take the girls to the playroom, their excited voices discussing which activity they would do that day. Half an hour later, he heard footsteps in the hall. Victoria. She passed by the office without noticing he was there, walking determinedly toward the playroom. William waited a few minutes and then silently followed her. What he witnessed through the ajar door left him cold. Victoria had entered the room and, with a false sweetness in her voice, told Emily she needed her in the kitchen to discuss the week's menu. Emily, ever helpful, left the girls playing with adapted building blocks, different textures so they could distinguish them by touch, and went out with Victoria. As soon as the nanny left, Victoria returned to the room alone. The girls didn't notice, focused on their constructions. And then William saw something that made his blood boil. Victoria began to meticulously rearrange the blocks that the girls had learned to identify and locate. She took the smooth blocks from the left compartment and mixed them with the textured ones on the right. She removed the small braille labels that Emily had so carefully attached. She put away the sensory mats that marked different areas of the room. When she finished, she looked at the girls with an expression William could only describe as satisfied. Lily and Daisy, oblivious to the sabotage, continued playing with the blocks they already had in their hands. William was about to enter and confront her when Victoria knelt beside the girls. Her voice came out soft, almost maternal, but the words were pure poison. "Girls, I need to talk to you about Emily. She does a good job, doesn't she? Teaching you to do things on your own." Lily and Daisy nodded enthusiastically, their faces lighting up. "But you know that the things she teaches you are very hard for children like you, don't you?" Victoria continued, her voice still sweet but laden with condescension. "You're special. You need help. Trying to do everything by yourselves will only get you hurt or frustrated when you can't manage." "But we can manage," Daisy protested, her voice full of childish pride. "I can find my toys by myself now." "For now, yes," Victoria said, stroking the girl's hair in a gesture that seemed affectionate, but was ice-cold. "But soon it will get harder, and you'll realize it's easier and safer to let the adults do things for you. That's what adults are for, to take care of children who need special care." William saw the confusion on his daughters' faces, saw how their newfound confidence began to waver under the weight of those subtly destructive words. He was about to intervene when he heard Emily returning down the hall. Victoria stood up quickly, recomposing her expression to one of benevolence. When Emily entered, she found her smiling sweetly at the girls. "Oh, Emily, you're back. I was just having a little chat with the girls. They're so sweet, aren't they?" Victoria passed her to leave the room, but not before adding in a low voice, but loud enough for William to hear. "Be careful not to create too many expectations. Children like them need to learn their limitations early." Emily paled but just nodded, turning her attention back to Lily and Daisy. It was only when she started looking for the materials that she noticed the sabotage. The blocks were all mixed up, the labels removed, the mats put away. William saw the look of defeat briefly cross the young woman's face before she hid it behind a forced smile. "You know what, girls? Let's play a different game today. How about we learn to reorganize the blocks again? It'll be like a hidden treasure hunt." She turned the sabotage into a new lesson, and William felt a deep admiration for this young woman who refused to give up on his daughters, even in the face of such cruel obstacles. He returned to his office but couldn't concentrate. Victoria's words echoed in his mind. Children like them. Too many expectations. Limitations. Each word was a small stone thrown at the foundation of self-confidence that Emily was trying to build in Lily and Daisy. William needed to do something. But what? Confronting Victoria would result in more arguments, more tension, and she was clever, always had excuses ready, always managed to make it seem like she was being the responsible one while painting Emily as irresponsible. That night, after the girls had gone to sleep, William accessed the security camera recordings. Victoria had given him the passwords, confident that he would see what she wanted him to see, but William started watching everything, not just the selected clips. What he discovered over the next few hours would change everything. There were videos of Emily working tirelessly with the girls, teaching them to recognize textures, sounds, smells, celebrating every small victory with genuine enthusiasm, comforting them when they were frustrated, but always encouraging them to try again. But there were also other videos Victoria clearly never intended for him to see. In one, recorded 3 days earlier, Emily had gone out to pick up new materials William had ordered for the girls, specialized braille books, adapted educational toys. Victoria entered the twins' room, where they were playing quietly. The conversation that followed made William feel nauseous. "Lily, Daisy, I need to talk to you about something important." Victoria's voice sounded grave, serious. "It's about Emily." The girls stopped playing, turning their heads in the direction of her voice. "Emily is leaving soon," Victoria lied shamelessly. "She told me she's tired of working with children who can't do normal things. She wants to work with children who can see, who can run and play without needing so much help." William saw his daughters pale in the video. "No," Lily whimpered. "Emily's not leaving. She said she was going to stay with us." "I know she said that, darling," Victoria replied with false compassion. "But people say a lot of things. The truth is, she's looking for another job, with a family that has normal children." The word normal landed like a bomb. Daisy started to cry, tears streaming down her little face. "Aren't we normal?" Victoria sighed, as if being forced to reveal a painful truth. "You're special, girls, very special. But that means you need much more care than other children, and not everyone has the patience for that. Emily was very nice to try and help you, but she realized it's just too hard." William had to pause the video, his hands shaking with rage. How dare she? How dare she plant those poisonous seeds in his daughters' minds, make them feel like they were a burden, that they were unwanted? He kept watching, each video worse than the last. In another, Victoria found Lily trying to get dressed on her own, something Emily had been patiently teaching her. When the girl struggled to find the correct armhole of her shirt, Victoria sighed loudly and said, "See, Lily, this is why you need help. You can't do these things by yourself. It's better to just accept it and stop trying." In another video, Daisy was practicing walking down the hallway using the reference points Emily had taught her, counting steps, occasionally touching the wall to orient herself. Victoria appeared and grabbed her by the arm, guiding her firmly. "You could trip and fall, Daisy. Come on, let me take you. It's safer this way." Every interaction was carefully calibrated to undermine the girls' confidence, to make them doubt their own abilities. William stayed up all night, watching hours of footage. By the time the sun began to rise, he had seen more than enough. His fiancée, the woman he thought he loved, the woman he trusted to help him care for his daughters, was a completely different person than he had imagined. But before he could decide what to do with this information, things got worse in ways he could never have predicted. It was a Thursday morning. William was in his office when he heard Emily arrive for her shift. The nanny usually arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, always on time, always smiling. He heard her cheerful voice greeting the cook, her light footsteps coming up the stairs toward the girls' room, and then he heard something that made him freeze. Screams, not of pain, but of anguish. Lily and Daisy were crying, their high-pitched voices echoing down the hall. William ran out of his office and took the stairs 2 at a time. He found Emily standing in the doorway of the girls' room, pale as a ghost, her hands trembling. Inside the room, Lily and Daisy were sobbing inconsolably. What happened? William entered the room, but when he tried to approach the twins, they backed away, hiding behind the bed. "I don't know." Emily's voice was broken, confused. "I just got here and they started crying when they heard me. Mr. Harrington, I swear I didn't do anything." Victoria appeared at the door, wearing a silk robe, a perfectly staged expression of concern on her face. "What's going on in here?" "Go away!" Daisy's voice came out in a muffled scream through her tears. "We don't want you here. You said you would stay, but you lied." William looked from Emily, who looked ready to faint, to Victoria, who wore an expression of false confusion. "What is she talking about?" "I don't know," Emily whispered, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I don't understand. Everything was fine yesterday. They were happy." "You left us," Lily whimpered, her voice broken. "Aunt Victoria told us. You got a job with normal kids because we're too hard." William's blood ran cold. He looked at Victoria, who averted her gaze for a fraction of a second before recomposing her expression. "Girls, what are you talking about?" Victoria entered the room, her voice laced with false concern. "Emily didn't say anything like that." "Yes, she did," Daisy insisted. "You told us last night. You said she was looking for another job because we need a lot of help and she's tired." Emily sobbed, a hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "I would never, ever say that. Lily, Daisy, I love you. I'm not going anywhere." But the words fell on ears that had been poisoned by Victoria's manipulation. The girls shrank back even further, refusing to approach the nanny who, until the day before, had been the person they trusted most in the world. William felt a cold fury take hold of him. He knew exactly what had happened. He had seen the seeds Victoria planted in the recordings, but now she had delivered the final blow, probably the night before, after he had gone to sleep. "Victoria, can we talk downstairs?" His voice came out too controlled, and she must have sensed something because she hesitated. "I think we should deal with this first," she replied, gesturing to the still crying girls. "They're clearly upset." "Now." It wasn't a request. Victoria shot a look of ill-disguised triumph at Emily before following William downstairs. They went to the office, and William closed the door firmly. "What did you say to them?" He turned to face her, his arms crossed over his chest. "Me?" Victoria's eyes widened in false innocence. "William, I didn't say anything. The girls must be confused, mixing things up." "Don't lie to me." He took a step toward her and she instinctively stepped back. "I saw the recordings, Victoria. All of them." The color drained from her face. What recordings? The cameras you installed? They record everything. Continuously. And I watched. I saw you sabotage Emily's work. I saw you lie to my daughters. Make them feel inadequate, incapable. I saw you plant the idea that Emily was going to leave. Victoria swallowed hard, but quickly recomposed her expression. You're twisting things. I was trying to protect the girls, prepare them for reality. Reality? William's voice rose. The reality is that you're destroying the self-confidence of 2 4-year-old children because you can't stand that someone else can do something you can't. That's ridiculous, she practically screamed. I love those girls. You don't love anyone but yourself. William had never spoken to her like this, had never let his anger show in this way. You see Lily and Daisy as projects, as dolls to control, not as people, not as children who need to grow and learn and have a chance to be happy. Victoria's mask finally fell completely. Her expression turned hard, cold. And you think that idealistic nanny is going to make your daughters happy? You think a few sensory games are going to change the fact that they're disabled? They're going to spend their entire lives depending on someone, William. All I'm doing is preparing them for that reality. Get out! The word came out low but laden with a finality that left no room for argument. What? Get out of my house now! Victoria laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. You're not thinking straight. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. When you calm down, you'll realize I'm right. I've never been thinking more clearly. William walked to the door and opened it. I want you to pack your things and leave. Our engagement is over. She stared at him for a long moment, and William saw several emotions cross her face. Surprise, anger, and finally, contempt. You'll regret this, she said, her voice venomous. When your precious little girls are still useless and dependent, you'll realize I was right, and you'll beg me to come back. Never. William held the door open, waiting. Victoria stormed out, her footsteps echoing down the hall. He heard her go upstairs, slam doors, throw things into suitcases. Half an hour later, she came down with 3 bags, called a car service, and left without a backward glance. William leaned against the closed door, the adrenaline beginning to fade. He had ended his engagement, kicked a New York high society woman out of his house. There would be social consequences, no doubt. Gossip, speculation, maybe even professional repercussions through her contacts. But when he thought of his daughters upstairs, crying because they believed someone who truly cared about them was abandoning them, none of that mattered. He went upstairs slowly, stopping at their bedroom door. Emily was still there, sitting on the floor in the hallway, hugging her knees, crying silently. Inside the room, the girls had calmed down a little, but were still sobbing. Emily! She lifted her tear-stained face to look at him. Victoria is gone. She's not coming back. A flash of relief crossed the young woman's face, but it was quickly replaced by sadness. That doesn't change anything, she said quietly. The girls believe I'm going to abandon them. I've lost their trust. William didn't know what to say. She was right. The damage was done. He could see in the videos how Victoria had meticulously built that narrative, planted those doubts, and now Lily and Daisy were convinced that Emily didn't want them. I have to go. Emily stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. It's better this way. If I stay, I'll only hurt them more. No. William stood up too. Please don't go. Give me time to fix this, to explain to them what really happened. But it was too late. Emily shook her head, fresh tears falling. They're 4 years old, Mr. Harrington. They won't understand psychological manipulation. All they know is that the person they trusted apparently doesn't want them. And every day that I stay here, knowing they hate me, will destroy me. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, her resignation letter already prepared. I'm sorry. I really thought I could help. She placed the letter in William's hands and went downstairs quickly, practically running. He heard her leave through the front door, heard the gate close, and then silence. William stood in the hallway, holding the resignation letter, listening to the muffled sobs of his daughters in the room. He had kicked out the villain, but the heroine had also left, and now he was alone, with no idea how to fix the damage Victoria had caused. The days following Emily's departure were the worst William had experienced since Eleanor's death. The house, which had begun to show signs of life and joy, reverted to a silent, oppressive mausoleum. Lily and Daisy regressed in ways that broke William's heart. The girls who had started to explore the house with growing confidence now refused to leave their rooms. They wouldn't touch the braille materials Emily had introduced, wouldn't walk on the sensory path, wouldn't do anything but sit on their beds, hugging stuffed animals. Lost in a frightening silence, William hired a new nanny, an older, experienced woman recommended by an agency. But Lily and Daisy rejected her completely. They screamed when she tried to approach, hid under their beds, and refused to eat when she tried to feed them. The poor woman lasted only 3 days before quitting, confessing she had never seen such traumatized children. At night, the night terrors began. William would wake to his daughter's screams, rushing to their room to find them crying inconsolably, calling for Emily between sobs. No matter how many times he tried to explain, tried to comfort them, they couldn't understand why the person who had given them hope and joy had suddenly disappeared from their lives. During the day, William worked from home, unable to leave the girls alone with strangers. He tried to care for them himself, but he was painfully inadequate for the task. He didn't know how to help them get dressed, how to guide them through the house, how to turn meals and baths into anything more than mechanical chores. Worse still, he saw how they were losing the skills Emily had worked so hard to develop. Lily, who had been starting to recognize simple words in Braille, no longer touched the special books. Daisy, who had learned to count steps and use reference points to navigate the house, now refused to take a single step without someone carrying her. It was like watching his daughters wither before his eyes, and William felt utterly helpless. A week after Emily left, William was in his office trying to review some contracts when he heard a noise from upstairs. He ran up and found Lily alone in the hallway, having apparently tried to leave her room on her own. She had tripped and fallen, and now she was sitting on the floor, crying softly. "Lily, are you okay?" William knelt beside her, checking for any injuries. She had a small scrape on her knee, nothing serious, but she was trembling violently. "I just wanted to go to the bathroom," she sobbed. "But I couldn't remember how many steps it was. Emily always helped me remember, but she left because I'm too hard." William's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "No, sweetie, no. You're not hard." He picked her up, feeling her cling to him desperately. "Emily didn't leave because you're hard. She left because there was a very big misunderstanding." But Lily was no longer listening. She was trapped in the narrative Victoria had planted, the deep-seated belief that she was inadequate, incapable, a burden to anyone who tried to care for her. William carried her back to the room, where Daisy was huddled on the bed, hugging a teddy bear Emily had given her. He sat between the two girls, feeling more lost than ever. It was in that moment that he made a decision. He couldn't go on like this. He had to do something drastic, something that would show the girls the truth about what had happened. But how do you make 2 4-year-olds understand psychological manipulation? How do you explain that an adult they trusted had deliberately lied to hurt them? The answer came to him suddenly. The recordings. He had evidence of everything Victoria had done. And if he could make the girls listen, maybe, just maybe, they could begin to understand that Emily had never abandoned them. That night, after the girls finally fell asleep, exhausted from crying, William returned to his office and began to review the recordings once more. But this time, with a different purpose. He looked for specific moments. Conversations between Victoria and the girls when she planted her poisonous lies, moments when she sabotaged Emily's work, and especially that last conversation, the one that had finally broken his daughter's spirits. He found the video from the night before the crisis. Victoria entering the girls' room after everyone had gone to sleep. William hadn't watched this specific one yet, and what he saw made his fury return with full force. Victoria sat on the bed between Lily and Daisy, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Girls, I need to tell you a secret, but you have to promise not to tell anyone." The twins, sleepy but curious, agreed. "Emily came to talk to me today," Victoria lied with frightening ease. "She said she got a new job, much better than this one. She's going to work for a family with normal children, children who can see and do things on their own. She said she's very happy because she finally won't have to keep teaching hard things to children who can't learn properly." William watched his daughters start to cry in the video, watched Victoria continue mercilessly. "I tried to convince her to stay," the woman continued, "but she said she can't take it anymore." That you're too much work. That she's tired of having to repeat the same things 1,000 times. She's leaving tomorrow morning, but she doesn't want to say goodbye because she says it's easier that way. Why doesn't she like us anymore? Daisy sobbed. Because you're not like other children, darling, Victoria replied, stroking the girl's hair. You need a lot of help, a lot of patience. And Emily realized she doesn't have enough patience. She wants to work with easy children, not special children like you. Every word was a calculated blow to the fragile self-esteem of two 4-year-old children. William had to pause the video several times, so strong was the anger he felt. But he kept watching because he needed evidence. He needed clear, undeniable proof of what Victoria had done. He found other equally disturbing videos, one where Victoria laughed cruelly after the girls left the room, commenting to herself about how pathetic and useless they were. Another, where she deliberately rearranged objects they had learned to locate, sabotaging months of progress with a few minutes of calculated cruelty. And then he found something he hadn't expected. A video from weeks ago, even before the incident in the inner garden. Victoria was on the phone with someone, and William turned up the volume to hear better. Don't worry, Mother, Victoria was saying, her voice laced with disdain. As soon as I marry him, I'm sending those problem children to a specialized boarding school. William has enough money to pay for the best institution. The girls will be well cared for by professionals, and I'll finally get to enjoy the life of a millionaire businessman's wife without having to deal with defective children getting in my way. William felt the floor disappear from under his feet. Victoria had never cared about Lily and Daisy. Never. It was all a facade, a carefully orchestrated performance to win his trust, while she planned to get rid of his daughters at the first opportunity. The revelation was so shocking that he had to get up and pace the office, trying to process it. He had almost married that woman. He had almost handed the future of his daughters over to someone who saw them as disposable obstacles. An idea began to form in his mind. Victoria had used manipulation and lies to try to destroy his daughters' lives. Maybe it was time to use the truth to destroy hers. He knew Victoria had started circulating a very different version of events in New York high society. According to the gossip that reached him through business colleagues, she was painting herself as the victim, the dedicated woman who had been unjustly dismissed for trying to protect vulnerable children from an irresponsible nanny. William spent the next few days immersed in careful planning. He knew that simply showing the recordings to a few people wouldn't be enough. Victoria was smart, well-connected, and had an influential family. She could easily discredit any private accusation, turn it into a he said, she said dispute. No, it had to be public. It had to be indisputable. And it had to be devastating. The perfect opportunity arose in a way he couldn't have planned better. Victoria's mother, Margaret Davenport, one of the matriarchs of New York high society, called William a week after the engagement ended. William, darling, her voice was syrupy on the phone, laden with false concern. We need to talk about this misunderstanding between you and my daughter. Victoria is devastated, simply devastated. I know there was some disagreement about the nanny, but I'm sure we can resolve this like civilized adults. William gripped the phone tightly. There's nothing to resolve, Margaret. The engagement is over. Don't be rash, she continued, ignoring his words. We've already sent out the invitations for the engagement dinner, 75 guests from the best of New York society. It would be a terrible scandal to cancel now. And think of the girls, William. They need a stable mother figure in their lives. The mention of his daughters almost made him hang up immediately, but then an idea sparked. The engagement dinner. 75 guests, all the important people in Victoria's social circles. When is this dinner? He asked, keeping his voice neutral. Saturday night at the Union Club. Everything is already booked and paid for. It would be a shame to waste it. She took a calculated pause. And it would be a public demonstration that you two have overcome your differences. Much more elegant than gossip and speculation, don't you think? William thought quickly. 4 days, he had 4 days to prepare everything. Let me think about it, he said. I'll call you back tomorrow. Don't take too long, darling, Margaret replied. Time is running out and people are talking. He hung up and immediately got to work. First, he needed technical help. He called Mark, a college friend who now worked in technology and events. I need a favor, William said when Mark answered. A big one, no questions asked. For you, always. What do you need? William explained what he had in mind. He needed a quality projection system, something that could display videos with perfect clarity for an audience of 75 people. He needed discreet technicians who could set everything up without drawing attention, and he needed it all to be ready by Saturday. Mark was silent for a moment. Are you going to do what I think you're going to do? Worse. Much worse. His friend let out a low whistle. Count me in. I'll need the venue details. William passed on the information and then made the second most important call. He found Emily's number in his records of terminated employees and dialed before he could change his mind. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Hello? Emily, it's William Harrington. Silence on the other end. Then, in a low voice, Mr. Harrington, are the girls okay? His heart ached. She really cared, genuinely cared. No, he admitted. They're not okay at all. They've completely regressed. They won't eat. They won't leave their room. They have nightmares every night. He heard her breath catch as if she were holding back tears. I'm so sorry. I think about them every day. I wish I could do something. You can, William said. I need you to trust me and come to an event on Saturday night. I can't explain all the details now, but I promise that after that night the girls will know the truth about what really happened. Emily hesitated. Mr. Harrington, I don't know if that's a good idea. If they see me, they might get even more upset. Please, he said, and there was a vulnerability in his voice he rarely showed. Trust me. Just this once. After a long pause, she agreed. Okay. Where and when? William gave her the details and then added, And Emily? Dress elegantly, as if you're the guest of honor. The next day he called Margaret Davenport back. The dinner is on, he announced, but I insist on bringing a special guest. Of course, darling, Margaret sounded triumphant. I knew you'd see reason. Victoria will be so happy. I'm sure it will be an unforgettable night, William replied, and it wasn't a lie. The next few days were a race against time. William carefully edited the recordings, creating a clear, chronological presentation of Victoria's manipulation. It began with scenes of Emily working with the girls, showing the progress they were making, the genuine joy on their faces. It then moved to Victoria's moments of sabotage, her lies, her calculated cruelties. And it ended with that devastating phone call where she revealed her plans to send Lily and Daisy to a boarding school as soon as she married William. Mark and his team discreetly visited the Union Club, mapping out the hall where the dinner would be held. They installed state-of-the-art projection equipment, tested angles, and ensured the sound would be crystal clear. Everything was hidden behind elaborate floral decorations that no one would think to question. William also made sure all the important guests would be present. He personally called some, confirming their attendance, building anticipation. Some were Victoria's friends, others were business acquaintances, and some were simply influential people whose opinions mattered in New York high society. On Thursday, he had an important meeting. He hired the best family lawyer in New York and began preparing legal documentation. He wanted to ensure that after the dinner, Victoria would have no legal recourse, no way to retaliate or harm him in any way. On Friday night, William was in the room with Lily and Daisy, trying for the 1,000th time to comfort them through another bout of night terrors. They woke up screaming, calling for Emily, and he held them as they cried. Girls, he said softly when they finally calmed down, tomorrow night something very important is going to happen. I'll need you to stay with Anna. He had asked the cook, a kind, motherly woman, to stay with the girls during the dinner. But after that, I promise everything will be better. Daisy, still sobbing, clutched his shirt. Is Emily coming back? William didn't want to promise something he wasn't sure he could deliver. He didn't know if Emily would agree to return after everything she had been through, but he said, I'm going to do everything I can to bring her back. Do you trust me? The girls nodded, though he could feel their hesitation. He had failed them so many times. Why should they trust him now? On Saturday, William woke up early. He spent the morning reviewing all the details, checking with Mark that the equipment was working perfectly, confirming that Emily was still coming. She sent a text at 2 in the afternoon. I still can't believe I'm doing this, but I'll be there. William went to pick up a new suit, something more formal than what he usually wore. He chose a tie Eleanor had given him years ago, saying it brought luck. He would need all the luck he could get that night. At 6 in the evening, as he was getting ready, he heard the doorbell ring. It was the florist, bringing a special bouquet he had ordered. White roses, Eleanor's favorite. They were for Emily, a silent apology for everything she had endured. Anna arrived at 7 to stay with the girls. William kissed Lily and Daisy, promising once again that everything would get better. They didn't really understand what was happening, but they seemed to sense that something important was about to unfold. On the way to the club, William picked up Emily from her modest apartment in Queens. When she got in the car, he almost didn't recognize her. She had dressed beautifully, wearing a dark blue dress that enhanced her brown eyes, her hair down in soft waves over her shoulders. She was nervous, he could see, but there was also a determination in her gaze. "Thank you for coming," he said, handing her the roses. Emily held the bouquet, surprised and touched. "Mr. Harrington, I still don't know what you're planning, but I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," he replied with more confidence than he actually felt. "And please, call me William." When they arrived at the Union Club, the valet line was already full of luxury cars. William could see elegantly dressed guests entering the historic building, one of New York's most exclusive institutions. All 75 guests had confirmed their attendance. Perfect. He offered his arm to Emily, and together they walked toward the entrance. He could feel the curious stares, hear the murmurs. Who was this young woman on William Harrington's arm? Where was Victoria? Inside the event hall, the decor was spectacular. Margaret Davenport had spared no expense, as always. Lush flowers, flickering candles, tables set with the finest china and crystal. And at the back of the hall, discreetly hidden behind a cascade of white flowers, was Mark's projection equipment. Victoria was near the entrance, greeting guests alongside her mother. When she saw William walk in with Emily, her expression shifted from eager anticipation to absolute shock, and then to ill-disguised fury. "William, what is the meaning of this?" Victoria's voice was controlled, but he could see the fury pulsing at her temples. Her mother, Margaret, looked from Emily to William with growing confusion. "I brought a special guest," William replied calmly, keeping Emily by his side. "I hope that's not a problem." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but she was surrounded by guests watching the scene with undisguised curiosity. She couldn't make a scene, not there, not in front of all of New York's elite. So she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course not. The more the merrier. But as William passed her, leading Emily into the hall, he heard Victoria whisper venomously, "You will regret this." The dinner was excruciating. William and Emily were placed at a side table, far from the main table, where Victoria reigned beside her family. Throughout the meal he could feel the stares, hear the whispers. Everyone wanted to know who this unknown young woman was, why the groom-to-be had brought another woman to his own engagement dinner. Emily was visibly uncomfortable, picking at her food without really eating. "William, are you sure about this?" she asked in a low voice. "All these people are staring at us, at me." "Trust me," he repeated. "A few more hours and it will all make sense." Between courses, William exchanged discreet messages with Mark, who was hidden in a control room at the back of the club. Everything was ready. The equipment was working perfectly. They were just waiting for the signal. When the desserts were served, Margaret Davenport stood up, gently tapping her champagne flute with a silver spoon. The hall fell silent, all eyes turning to her. "Dear friends," her voice echoed through the hall, perfectly modulated and full of artificial warmth. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two hearts, of two families. My dear daughter Victoria and William Harrington are finally making their commitment official, and I could not be happier." Polite applause rippled through the room. Victoria stood beside her mother, radiant in a white engagement dress that probably cost more than Emily earned in 6 months. She looked directly at William, her eyes challenging, as if to say, "See? You have no choice. You're trapped." But before Margaret could continue her prepared speech, William stood up. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "but I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The hall fell into absolute silence. Victoria froze, her expression flickering between confusion and alarm. William walked to the front of the hall, feeling all eyes on him. "Mark," he said quietly into his phone, already hidden in his palm. "It's time." The lights in the hall dimmed slightly, and a giant screen began to descend from the cascade of flowers where it had been hidden. The guests murmured in surprise, turning in their chairs to get a better look. "What are you doing?" Victoria hissed, but William ignored her. "When you all gathered here today," he began, his voice firm and clear, "it was with the expectation of celebrating an engagement. But I could not, in good conscience, continue this engagement without everyone knowing the truth about the kind of person Victoria Davenport really is." "William," Margaret protested, but he continued, "many of you know that I have 2 daughters, Lily and Daisy. They are 4 years old and they are blind. In recent months, I hired a nanny specializing in inclusive education to help them develop independence and confidence. That nanny," he pointed to Emily, who was as pale as a ghost, "is Emily Carter." The guests looked at Emily with renewed curiosity. "Victoria did not approve of Emily's methods," William continued. "She believed my daughters should be kept safe and immobile, that they should never try to do anything on their own. Emily disagreed, and so Victoria began a cruel campaign to sabotage her, and worse, to emotionally destroy my daughters." "That's absurd," Victoria shouted, her face red with humiliation and rage. "You're making up lies because you can't accept that your permissive methods were harming your own children." "They aren't lies," William said calmly. "They are documented facts. Mark, if you please." The screen came to life, and the first video began to play. It showed Emily in the inner garden with Lily and Daisy, the girls laughing as they explored the sensory path, painted with their hands, and learned through play. The joy was palpable, impossible to fake. The guests watched, fascinated. Some commented quietly on how happy the girls looked. Then the video changed. It showed Victoria entering the playroom after Emily had left, meticulously rearranging the materials the girls had learned to locate, removing Braille labels, sabotaging months of progress with a few minutes of calculated cruelty. A murmur of shock went through the hall. Victoria was pale now, gripping the table for support. "But wait," William said, his voice laced with a cold anger he kept tightly under control. "It gets better." The next video showed Victoria talking to Lily and Daisy, her voice sweet but laced with poison as she planted doubts about their own capabilities. The contrast between her syrupy words and the cruelty of their content was shocking. "You're too fragile for this nonsense. You must accept your limitations. Children like you will never be able to do things on their own." Several women in the audience gasped. An older man shook his head in disgust. Margaret tried to intervene. "William, this is clearly taken out of context. My daughter was just being realistic with the children." "Realistic?" William laughed humorlessly. "Let's see just how realistic she was being." The final video began to play. Victoria on the phone with her mother, discussing her future plans. Her voice echoed through the hall in high definition. "As soon as I marry him, I'm sending those problem children to a specialized boarding school. William has enough money to pay for the best institution. The girls will be well cared for by professionals, and I'll finally get to enjoy the life of a millionaire businessman's wife without having to deal with defective children getting in my way." The silence that followed was absolute. Then it erupted into a chaos of indignant voices. Margaret was white as a sheet, staring at her daughter in horror. "Victoria, did you say that? Did you really plan to do that?" Victoria opened and closed her mouth several times, but no words came out. There was no possible defense. 75 people had just heard, in her own words, exactly the kind of person she was. But William wasn't finished. The video continued, showing more moments. Victoria mocking the girls when she thought no one was looking, calling them pathetic and useless. Victoria deliberately lying to Lily and Daisy, telling them Emily was abandoning them because they were too difficult. Each video was more devastating than the last. Victoria's perfect mask was shattered piece by piece in front of everyone she knew, everyone who mattered in her social circles. When the videos finally ended, the lights came back up. Victoria was slumped in her chair, tears of humiliation and rage streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Around her, guests were getting up, grabbing their purses and coats, murmuring among themselves with expressions of disgust and disapproval. "You've destroyed everything." Victoria finally found her voice screaming at William across the hall. "My reputation, my life, everything." "You destroyed yourself," William replied calmly. "I just showed everyone who you really are." Margaret approached William, her face a mask of restraint. "The recordings, are they authentic?" "Completely. They were made by the security cameras your daughter insisted on installing. Ironic, isn't it?" The matriarch looked back at where Victoria was still sitting, broken. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the hall, followed quickly by other members of the Davenport family. The remaining guests didn't linger much longer. In 15 minutes, the hall that had been filled with lively conversation and laughter was practically empty. All that was left was William, Emily, Mark and his team discreetly dismantling the equipment, and Victoria, still sitting alone at her table, destroyed. William approached her one last time. "I hope it was worth it," he said quietly. "Your need for control, your cruelty to 2 innocent children. I hope it was worth losing everything." Victoria lifted her face, and there was so much hatred in her eyes that William took a step back. "You will pay for this," she hissed. "Somehow, someday you will pay." "I don't think so," William replied. "You see, besides exposing you publicly, I also took the liberty of filing for a restraining order. You can't come near me or my daughters. If you try, you'll go to jail, and your lawyers will be receiving a lawsuit for emotional damages to minors tomorrow. Every cent you or your family has won't be enough to pay for what you've done." He turned and walked back to where Emily was waiting, pale and trembling. She had watched it all, seen the full extent of Victoria's cruelty exposed to the world. "Come on," William said softly, offering his arm. "It's time to go home." The drive back to the mansion was silent. Emily stared out the car window, processing everything she had just witnessed. William drove with his hands steady on the wheel, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking about his daughters, about how he would explain everything to them. "Mr. Harrington," Emily finally broke the silence, her voice hesitant. "William," she corrected herself, "what you did back there was incredible and terrifying and necessary. But the girls, will they understand?" William sighed deeply. "I don't know. They're so little, but I have to try." He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "And I need you to help me." Emily was silent for a moment. "I don't know if I can face seeing them reject me again. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced." "I know," William said softly, "and I'm sorry I didn't believe you from the beginning, for letting Victoria do what she did. I failed you and my daughters." "You were grieving," Emily replied, and there was genuine compassion in her voice. "You were trying to survive. It's not your fault that someone took advantage of that. But it's my responsibility to fix it," William insisted. "And I can't do it alone." When they arrived at the mansion, the lights in the living room were still on. Anna appeared at the door, her expression worried. "Mr. Harrington, thank goodness you're back. The girls had another episode. I finally managed to calm them down, but it was difficult." William entered quickly, Emily hesitant behind him. "How are they now?" "Sleeping, but restlessly. They keep calling for Emily in their dreams." Emily let out a strangled sound, a hand covering her mouth. William turned to her. "Come upstairs with me, please." They went up the stairs silently. The door to the girls' room was ajar, and William could hear Lily and Daisy's uneven breathing, even in their sleep. He went in first, Emily stopping at the threshold, as if afraid to go any further. Lily was curled up in her bed, hugging the teddy bear Emily had given her. Daisy was on the other side of the room, but her hand was stretched out as if searching for someone who was no longer there. William knelt between the 2 beds, gently touching Lily's shoulder. "Sweetie, wake up. Daddy needs to talk to you and your sister." Lily stirred, waking slowly. When she realized she was being touched, she flinched instinctively. "Daddy?" "Yes, it's me. And I brought someone very special to see you." Daisy was also waking up, sitting up confused in her bed. "What's happening?" William took a deep breath. "Girls, I need to tell you something very important. About Emily." The mention of her name made both girls stiffen. "We don't want to know about Emily," Lily said, her voice small but determined. "She left us." No, she didn't leave, William said firmly. Someone lied to you about that. Someone said very ugly and very wrong things. It was Aunt Victoria, Daisy whispered. She said Emily was tired of us. Aunt Victoria lied, William said, his voice thick with emotion. She lied because she wanted you to be sad and scared. She wanted you to stop learning and growing, because when you were happy and confident, she couldn't control you. But why? Lily asked, confusion evident in her voice. Why would she do that? William struggled to find the right words, an explanation that 4-year-olds could understand. Because some people don't like it when other people are happy. And Aunt Victoria didn't like seeing you happy. Emily remained in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face as she listened. Emily never wanted to leave, William continued. She loves you very much. But when you thought she had said those horrible things, she was so sad that she thought it would be better to leave, so she wouldn't make you even sadder. Does she still like us? Daisy's voice was so small, so full of hesitant hope, that William felt his heart clench. Why don't you ask her yourself? He gestured to Emily, who took a hesitant step into the room. The girls turned their heads toward the sound of her footsteps. Emily, Lily whispered, as if afraid it was a dream. Yes, Emily replied, her voice broken with emotion. It's me. And yes, I still like you very much. I never stopped. I never will. There was a moment of tense silence. William barely breathed, waiting, praying that the girls would believe, that they could overcome the poison Victoria had planted. Then Daisy climbed out of bed, her feet finding the floor hesitantly. She began to count steps, as Emily had taught her, orienting herself by the sound of the nanny's voice. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and then her small hands found Emily's legs. Emily immediately knelt, opening her arms, and Daisy threw herself into them, starting to cry. I thought you didn't like us anymore. I thought we were too hard. Never, 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 Emily repeated between her own tears, hugging the little girl tightly. You are the most wonderful children I have ever met. You are smart and brave, and you can do anything you want to do. Lily was still hesitant on the bed, as if she couldn't believe it was real. Emily reached out an arm to her, keeping the other around Daisy. Lily, come here. I've missed you so much. Lily slowly got out of bed, walking carefully until she reached Emily. When her hands touched the nanny's face, feeling the tears there, something inside her seemed to break. She started to cry too, throwing herself into Emily's arms. William watched, his own tears now flowing freely. The three of them hugged in the middle of the room, crying together, releasing weeks of pain and fear and sadness. After a while, when the tears finally began to subside, Lily asked, Is Aunt Victoria coming back? No, William answered firmly. She is never coming back. She did very bad things, and she is no longer welcome here. And is Emily going to stay? Daisy asked, clutching Emily's shirt as if afraid she would disappear again. Emily looked at William over the girls' heads, a question in her eyes. He nodded encouragingly. If you want me to stay, Emily said softly, then yes, I will stay. If you'll let me, I'll stay forever. Forever, Lily repeated. Forever, Emily promised. The girls seemed to process this. Then Daisy asked, Can we go back to playing in the garden, with the paints and the chimes? Emily laughed through her tears. We can do whatever you want. Paint, play, learn. We'll pick up right where we left off. And will you teach us more words in Braille? Lily asked shyly. All the words you want to learn, Emily promised. William watched the reunion, feeling something inside him begin to heal. It wasn't just his daughters who were recovering. It was him too. For the first time since Eleanor's death, he felt that maybe, just maybe, they could be a family again. Different, certainly. Incomplete without Eleanor always, but still a family. The girls finally calmed down enough to get back into their beds, but not before making Emily promise once more that she would be there in the morning. She promised, kissing both their foreheads, tucking them in with her usual care. William and Emily left the room, leaving the door ajar as the girls liked. In the hallway, they finally had a moment to talk. Thank you, William said, for not giving up on them, for coming back, even after everything. Emily shook her head. I couldn't give up on them even if I wanted to. They've been in my heart since the first day. About your job, William began, but Emily interrupted him. It's not just about the job, she said softly. It's about them, about helping them grow and learn and become everything they can be. I know, William replied, and that's why I don't want it to be just a job. He took a deep breath. I want to offer you a permanent position as a specialized educator and legal guardian for the girls, with a proper salary, paid specialization studies, and full participation in the family. Emily was speechless for a long moment, processing the offer. Mr. Harrington, William, I don't know what to say. Say yes, William replied with a small smile. Lily and Daisy need you. I need you. Not just as a nanny, but as part of this family. Emily's eyes filled with tears again. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I accept. And so began the true journey of healing. The first few days were challenging. Lily and Daisy still had moments of fear, episodes where Victoria's negative programming resurfaced. Sometimes, in the middle of an activity, one of them would stop and ask, Are you sure I can do this? Isn't it too hard for me? Every time Emily would answer with infinite patience, You can do anything you set your mind to. It might take time, it might take practice, but you can do it. William made a point of being more present. He rearranged his schedule, delegated more responsibilities at the office, and ensured he spent at least a few hours a day with his daughters. He participated in the activities Emily planned, learning alongside the girls. One morning, 3 weeks after the fateful dinner, William woke to the sound of laughter coming from the inner garden. He went downstairs, still in his pajamas, and found Emily and the girls already awake, working on a new project. Good morning, Daddy, Daisy greeted him cheerfully. We're making a tactile map of the house. Emily had created a 3-dimensional model of the mansion using materials of different textures. Each room had a different texture, and every important piece of furniture was represented in a smaller scale. The girls could touch the map and learn to mentally visualize the layout of the house. This is incredible, William said, impressed. How do you think of these things? Emily smiled. Research, creativity, and a lot of love for these two special girls. Over the weeks, the progress was remarkable. Lily returned to practicing Braille with enthusiasm, her fingers flying over the raised dots with growing confidence. Daisy perfected her mobility skills, learning to navigate not just the house but the outdoor garden as well. Emily introduced new activities. Music lessons, where the girls learned to play the piano using mostly their hearing and touch. Adapted cooking, where they prepared simple recipes, developing fine motor skills and independence. Even swimming, in the mansion's pool, where they learned to orient themselves by acoustics and the edges. William watched it all with a mixture of pride and admiration. Emily wasn't just teaching his daughters to live with blindness. She was teaching them to thrive, to see their condition not as a limitation, but as a different way of experiencing the world. 2 months after Emily's return, William came home from work to a surprise. The girls were in the living room alone without immediate supervision. They had set up a small adapted puppet theatre, with puppets that had different textures so they could distinguish them. Look, Daddy, Lily called to him. We made a play. Is Emily watching? William asked, looking around for the nanny. I'm in the kitchen, her voice came from the other room. They asked to do the show by themselves. They're doing great. William sat down and the girls performed their play. It was a simple story about 2 sisters who ventured into a magical forest, but the way they manipulated the puppets, coordinated the dialogue, and moved around the small stage they had built demonstrated a level of independence and confidence that would have been unthinkable months ago. When they finished, William applauded enthusiastically. That was wonderful. You are incredible artists. The girls ran to hug him, their faces beaming with pride. Emily came into the room bringing juice and cookies, smiling at the scene. That night, after the girls had gone to sleep, William and Emily sat in the inner garden, now fully equipped as a permanent sensory learning space. They're so different, William said, marveling. So confident, so happy. They always had it inside them, Emily replied. They just needed someone to believe in them and give them the right tools. William looked at her, illuminated by the soft light of the garden lamps. Over these months of working together, he had gotten to know Emily in a way that went beyond her role as his daughter's educator. He knew her passion for justice, her infinite compassion, her subtle sense of humor. He knew how she hummed softly when she thought no one was listening, how she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, how her eyes shone when Lily or Daisy achieved something new, and he realized, with a clarity that surprised him, that he had fallen in love with her. It wasn't like what he had felt for Eleanor. That love had been young, fiery, full of the passion of youth. This was different, more mature, deeper, built on mutual respect and shared values. But was it too soon? Was it inappropriate? Emily worked for him, cared for his daughters. There was a power dynamic he didn't want to complicate, so he decided not to rush anything. He would let things develop naturally if they were meant to develop at all. The months passed. The video of the engagement dinner had circulated discreetly among New York high society, and Victoria Davenport had become persona non grata in the social circles she once dominated. William heard rumors that she had moved to Miami, trying to start over far from the scene of her humiliation. He felt no pity, not after what she had done to his daughters. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after Emily's return, William was in his office when he heard music coming from the living room. It wasn't a recording, it was live music. Piano. He went downstairs and found Lily sitting at the living room piano, an instrument that hadn't been played since Eleanor's death. Her small fingers found the keys with surprising precision, playing a simple but beautiful melody that Emily had taught her. Daisy was beside her, singing along, her voice clear and in tune. Emily sat nearby, watching but not interfering. When she saw William at the door, she smiled and gestured for him to enter quietly. "They practice every day," Emily whispered. "Lily has a natural talent." William watched his daughters, so different from the scared, withdrawn children they had been. They were growing, developing, becoming whole individuals despite the challenges they faced. When the music ended, he applauded. The girls turned, surprised. "Daddy, we didn't know you were there," Lily said. "I didn't want to interrupt, it was beautiful." Daisy jumped off the piano bench and ran toward him, her steps confident, mentally counting the distance. "We're planning a performance for our birthday." The birthday. William realized with a start that the girls would be turning 5 in a few weeks. Time had passed so quickly. "A performance sounds wonderful," he said. "Can we invite people?" "We want everyone to see what we can do," Lily said with pride. Emily approached. "They're very excited. I've been helping them plan a special performance." William looked from Emily to his daughters and back again. An idea began to form in his mind, an idea that both scared and excited him. "How about we have a big party," he suggested. "Invite friends, family, important people. Show everyone how much Lily and Daisy have grown." The girls loved the idea, jumping with excitement. Emily seemed hesitant. "Are you sure? After what happened at the last event?" "Exactly because of what happened at the last event," William said. "I want everyone to see the truth. Not Victoria's distorted version, but the reality of 2 incredible girls who are thriving." "Then let's do it," Emily agreed, smiling. The following weeks were a flurry of preparations. William hired the best event planners, but he let Lily and Daisy have input on every aspect. They chose the theme, a sensory garden with decorations that incorporated textures, scents, and sounds. They chose the menu, focusing on foods with interesting flavors and textures. And they planned their performance with Emily's help. William sent invitations to close friends, work colleagues, and some of the same guests who had witnessed Victoria's downfall. He wanted them to see not just the scandal but the redemption, not his but his daughter's. The day of Lily and Daisy's birthday dawned sunny and perfect. The mansion's garden had been transformed into a sensory paradise, with interactive stations scattered throughout the space. Water fountains created relaxing sounds. Aromatic gardens released fragrances of lavender and jasmine, and paths of different textures invited exploration. William watched the final preparations, his heart racing for reasons that went beyond the party. In the pocket of his jacket, a small blue velvet box felt as heavy as if it contained the entire world. He had made the decision 3 weeks ago. After months of watching Emily with his daughters, seeing how she loved them unconditionally, how she had transformed their lives and, honestly, his as well, William knew what his heart wanted. He wanted Emily to be a permanent part of his family, not just as an educator, but as a partner, as the girl's mother, as his wife. He had talked to Lily and Daisy, of course. He had asked how they would feel if Emily became an official part of the family. The girls had been so excited, they immediately started planning what it would be like, where Emily would sleep, if they could call her Mom. Now, as the guests began to arrive, William felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He planned to propose during the party, after the girls' performance, in front of everyone. Emily deserved a special moment, a public acknowledgement of how much she meant to them. The guests arrived in groups, William's friends from the business world, some with their own families, neighbors who had watched the transformation from afar. And to William's surprise, several families Emily had met through her inclusive education studies, parents of other visually impaired children whom she had helped informally over the years. Lily and Daisy circulated through the party with impressive confidence. They greeted guests, offered tours of the sensory gardens, and proudly explained each interactive station. Some of the adults present, especially those who had known them before, were visibly moved by their transformation. "How they've changed," a neighbor commented to William. "They hardly seem like the same girls." "They're not," William replied, watching his daughters laugh as they showed a group of children how to identify different spices by smell. "They're much better versions of themselves." Thanks to Emily. The mention of her name made him look for her automatically. Emily was near the food table, talking animatedly with some of the parents she had invited. She looked beautiful, in a pale yellow dress that enhanced her radiant smile. William felt his heart ache with love. Around 4 in the afternoon, it was time for the special performance. William gathered all the guests in the area of the garden that had been set up as a small outdoor auditorium. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle around a low stage, decorated with flowers and colorful fabrics. Lily and Daisy went up on stage, accompanied by Emily. The guests fell silent, expectant. Emily began. "Good afternoon, everyone. Lily and Daisy have prepared something very special to share with you today. Over the past few months, they have worked hard, not just on practical skills, but also on expressing themselves through art. Today, they will demonstrate everything they've learned." She stepped off the stage, leaving the girls alone under the gaze of 75 people. Lily walked to an upright piano that had been placed on the stage, counting her steps with precision. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. "I'm going to play a song Emily taught me," she announced in a clear voice. "It's called Clair de Lune, but a simplified version." And then she began to play. Her small hands found the keys without hesitation, producing a melancholic and beautiful melody that floated through the garden. It wasn't perfect. There were a few mistakes here and there, but the emotion was undeniable. Many of the guests had tears in their eyes. When Lily finished, Daisy took the center of the stage. "I'm going to recite a poem," she said. "I wrote it myself in Braille with Emily's help." She held a sheet of paper with raised dots and began to read, her fingers sliding over the Braille as she recited words about flowers she had never seen but could feel, about colors she knew through sensations, about a world that was different but no less beautiful for being experienced without sight. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. The girls bowed, radiant with pride and joy. William went up on stage, hugging his daughters. "I'm so proud of you both," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Then he turned to the audience. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate this special day with Lily and Daisy. 5 years ago, these 2 girls came into the world and changed my life forever. 2 years ago, we went through a terrible loss that nearly destroyed us. But today we are here, stronger, more united, and full of hope for the future." He paused, looking for Emily in the crowd. "And none of this would be possible without one extraordinary person. Emily, could you come up here, please?" Emily looked surprised and hesitant, but Lily and Daisy called for her enthusiastically. She came up on stage, clearly not understanding what was happening. William took her hand. "Emily Carter, you came into our lives 8 months ago. At the time, we were a broken family, lost without hope. My daughters lived in fear. I lived hidden behind my work, and none of us knew how to move forward." Tears began to stream down Emily's face as she listened. "You didn't just teach us how to live with blindness," William continued. "You taught us how to live, period. You taught Lily and Daisy that they are capable of anything. You taught me that being a father means being present, not just financially, but emotionally. You gave us back our joy, our hope, our future." He let go of her hand and knelt, taking the small velvet box from his pocket. The audience gasped collectively. "Emily, you are already a part of this family in every way that matters. Lily and Daisy love you like a mother. I love you as the love of my life. Would you do me the honor of officially becoming part of this family, of marrying me?" He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds. Emily covered her mouth with her hands, tears now falling freely. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, yes, yes." William stood up and kissed her, as the audience erupted in applause and cheers. Lily and Daisy joined the hug, the four of them forming a tight circle of love and joy. It was in this moment of perfect happiness that William saw something that made his blood run cold for a moment. Through the iron gates of the mansion, on the outside, stood Victoria. She was alone, wearing clothes that looked worn compared to what she used to wear. Her hair was dull, her makeup carelessly applied. She watched the scene in the garden with an expression of bitter envy and deep regret. William could imagine what she had gone through in the past few months: the public humiliation, the social ostracism, the loss of status and connections, everything she had valued, destroyed by her own cruelty. For a moment he almost felt pity, but then he remembered his daughter's tears, the trauma she had deliberately inflicted, and the pity evaporated. Victoria realized he had seen her. For a long moment they stared at each other through the gate. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing down the street, a lonely figure carrying the weight of her own choices. William turned his attention back to his family, his real family. Emily was showing the ring to Lily and Daisy, who were touching it carefully, exclaiming how beautiful it was even without being able to see it. Guests came up to congratulate them. Hugs were exchanged, joy filled the air. That night, after the guests had left and the girls had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from so much excitement and happiness, William and Emily sat in the inner garden where it had all begun. "I still can't believe this is real," Emily said, twisting the ring on her finger. 8 months ago, I was just a recent graduate looking for a job. Now I'm going to marry you and be a mother to 2 incredible girls." "You were always incredible," William said, pulling her closer. "I was just lucky enough to realize it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds of the garden. "You know what's funny?" Emily said eventually. "If Victoria hadn't been so cruel, if she hadn't tried to tear us apart, maybe we never would have gotten to this point. Her cruelty ended up bringing about something beautiful." "It wasn't her cruelty that brought this," William corrected gently. "It was your love for the girls, your refusal to give up on them, your courage to come back even after everything. Those qualities would exist regardless of what Victoria did." Emily smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "Let's make good memories from now on, memories that will erase all the bad ones." "We already are," William replied, kissing the top of her head. And they were. In the months and years that followed, the Harrington Carter family flourished. Lily developed an exceptional talent for music and began composing her own pieces. Daisy discovered a love for writing, dictating stories that Emily transcribed and that were eventually published as children's books about overcoming adversity. William learned to balance work and family, discovering that being present in his daughters' lives was more rewarding than any successful business deal. And Emily continued to do what she did best, believing in possibilities, seeing potential where others saw limitations, and loving unconditionally. As for Victoria, rumors about her occasionally circulated. Some said she had moved out of the country, others that she had tried to rebuild her life but never regained the status she once had. William didn't know and didn't care. She was part of a past they had overcome. 5 years after that memorable birthday party, William and Emily were celebrating their 4th wedding anniversary. Lily and Daisy, now 10 years old, were attending a top-tier inclusive school where they thrived academically and socially. They had friends, passions, and dreams for the future. One evening, while they were having a family dinner, Daisy asked an unexpected question. "Daddy, do you remember Aunt Victoria?" William exchanged a look with Emily before answering. "Yes, I remember. Why do you ask?" "I was just thinking," Daisy said thoughtfully. "If she hadn't done those bad things, you and Mommy Emily might never have fallen in love, and our family wouldn't be the way it is now." "That's true," William admitted, But she didn't create our family, sweetie. It was love, perseverance, and the courage to try again even after bad things happened. And Emily, Lily added. Emily, who never gave up on us. Emily smiled, her eyes shining. And you two, who are the bravest girls I know. That night, when the girls were asleep, William found Emily in the inner garden once more, the place that had witnessed so many important moments of their journey. Happy? He asked, hugging her from behind. More than I ever imagined possible, she replied, lacing her fingers with his. And it was true. They had been through darkness, pain, betrayal, and near destruction, but they had emerged on the other side stronger, more united, and infinitely grateful for the lessons learned and the love they had found. Lily and Daisy didn't just survive their visual impairment. They thrived, becoming living examples that limitations are often imposed by others, not by circumstances. They proved that with love, proper support, and belief in themselves, they could soar in a world without light, but overflowing with possibilities, love, and hope. And that was a lesson that William, Emily, and everyone who knew the girls would carry with them forever. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of William, Emily, Lily, and Daisy has touched your hearts deeply. This journey of overcoming adversity, love, and redemption shows us that true limitations are not in our circumstances, but in the barriers others try to impose on us. If this emotional narrative resonated with you, we have a special playlist full of equally captivating stories waiting for you. To continue this emotional journey with us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. We bring you unique stories daily that explore the complexity of life, the power of true love, and the strength of the human spirit. Your opinion is very important to us, so let us know in the comments which moment moved you the most in this story. Was it the scene in the inner garden, the public exposure of Victoria, or the beautiful ending with the marriage proposal? Share your thoughts with us. We'll be here tomorrow with a new story that promises to touch your soul. Until then, remember, never underestimate the transformative power of true love and genuine dedication. See you in the comments.